Okay. Good morning. For the record, my name is Tanya Fernandez Anderson. Oh, my bad, Cam. Good morning. For the record, my name is Tanya Fernandez Anderson, the District 7 City Councilor. I am the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Ways and Means, and this hearing is being recorded. It is being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-TV and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. The Council's budget review process will encompass a series of public hearings that began in April and will run through June. We strongly encourage residents to take a moment to engage in this process by giving public testimony for the record. You can do this in several ways. Attend one of our hearings and give public testimony. We will take public testimony at the end of each departmental hearing and also at a hearing dedicated to public testimony. The full hearing schedule is on our website at boston.gov/council-budget. You can give testimony virtually via Zoom. For virtual testimony, you can sign up using our online form on our council budget review website or by emailing the committee at ccc.wm@boston.gov. When you are called to testify, please state your name and affiliation and/or residence, and limit your comments to just a few minutes to ensure that all comments and concerns can be heard. Email your written testimony to the committee at ccc.wm@boston.gov or submit a 2-minute video of your testimony through the form on our website. For more information on the City Council budget process and how to testify, please visit the City Council's budget website at boston.gov/council-budget. Today's hearing is on docket 0760 to 0762, orders for the FY24 operating budget, including annual appropriations for departmental operations for the school department and for other post-employment benefits, OPEB. Docket 0763, 0765 to 0766, orders for the capital fund transfer appropriations. Docket 0764, 0767 to 0768, orders for the capital budget, including loan orders and lease purchase agreements. Our focus area for this hearing will be an overview of the FY budget for Boston Public Schools with a focus on operations. Our panelists for today's hearings are Sam DePina, Deputy Superintendent of Operations, Nate Cooter, Chief Financial Officer, Frances Canty, Interim Chief Human Capital Officer. I'm joined today by my council colleagues, Councilor Liz Braden, District 9, Council President Ed Flynn, District 2, Councilor Julia Mejia at large, Councilor Louis-Jean at large. For our format, as usual, we will go straight to the administration for your presentation, and then to my council colleagues, for an opening statement if they have one, then to administration for presentation. Round one of questions will consist of 8 to 10 minutes. If folks are still around, a second round. I know that we have a lot on our plate and trying to wrap up the budget hearing. So if there's a preference to wrap up all of your questions within 10 to 12 minutes, I'm okay with that too. And we can do that and then go straight to public testimony. In the orders of arrival, I will call on Councilor Liz Braden, District 9, for your opening statement. You have 30 seconds.
Good morning, Madam Chair. In the interest of time, I will waive my opening statement. I think the Boston School budget is a huge part of the total City Boston budget, and I look forward to the discussion this morning, and I will hold my questions for later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Liz Braden. Council President Flynn, do you have an opening statement?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm looking to hear about how we're going to make our schools healthy for our students and teachers to learn and to teach and to be safe in as well. Also want to remind my colleagues that we also have many hearings, but we do have the option of rejecting the budget the first time. So then we have another series of hearings after. So it's it's a good way to negotiate and to engage with BPS teams. So just want to let my colleagues, just remind my colleagues that we also have that option to reject the school budget the first time, and then the difficult and challenging part is the second part of working with the BPS team. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council President Flynn, for that ad hoc Ways and Means Vice Chair comment. And Councilor Mejia, do you have an opening statement?
Sorry.
Councilor Lujan, do you have an opening statement?
Am I still on mute? I'm so sorry.
Oh,
Councilor
Mejia, you
yes,
have the
can
floor.
you hear me? Sorry, my internet is a little bit laggy, so I'm not sure if you can hear me or if I'm chopping up a little bit. But in the interest of time, I am going to hold back on my comments, and I look forward to having the conversation and diving deeper into what we need to do to meet this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Lujan.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And I want to thank everyone from the BPS team for all of the work that you do on behalf of our kids. Really excited to hear from you about the ways that we've been improving systems and making things work. So we'll hold my questions and comments to make sure that we are doing everything we can to meet our kids' potential. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lujan. Ms. Canty, can you pronounce your first name for me so that I don't mispronounce it?
Princess.
Princess. Okay. Thank you. And Mr. DePina, Mr. Cooter, Ms. Canty, you have the floor for your presentation.
Thank you so much, councilors, and good morning. Should I be sharing my screen for the presentation this morning?
You may.
Okay, I just need 1 second to get it loaded and we'll be ready to go.
Madam Chair, it's Councilor Coletta. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that I was also here. Thank you.
Councilor Coletta, I didn't see you. Councilor Coletta, do you have an opening statement?
No, I just want to thank the BPS team and look forward to the conversation. I just wanted to note that I was also here. Thank you so much.
Understood. You're welcome. To the administration, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and good morning, city councilors, and thank you for the opportunity to present this morning on operations for the Boston Public Schools. We believe that a high-performing central office is critical for supporting schools and students. Over the last few years, we've invested in facilities upgrades and operational improvements to eliminate barriers to learning. We know that world-class instruction is only made better by world-class facilities, so we continue to invest in facilities upgrades and improvements. We know that students who are hungry have a harder time learning, so we strive to provide high-quality, free meals for all students. And we know that nothing is more important than a high-quality teacher in every classroom. So we continue to invest in human capital systems and in recruiting culturally diverse and talented students. We know that operations are critical for closing opportunity and achievement gaps. Operations has been the focus of a number of reports and plans guiding and recommending the district where investments are needed to change the way Central operates. As part of the DESE work, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, we conducted a review of funding for our lowest performing schools, and we've done a deep dive in transportation and student safety. We'll also highlight the progress we've made of facilities condition assessments and the K-6 7 to 12 facilities design studies. This operational work lays the foundation for the superintendent's budget priorities. For those folks who are watching the budget hearing for the first time, we wanted to provide an overall investment summary. The changes in our budget from FY23 to this proposal can be broken down into 3 main categories: strategic investments, increased costs, and long-term sustainability. Much of the investment in operations comes through increased costs, including $18.9 million in high-quality facilities, $12.3 million cost increases in transportation, and $700,000 in central office capacity for teacher recruitment, diversity, professional development, and support. With that, I'll now turn it over to Dr. Sam DePina, our Deputy Superintendent of Operations.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Cooter. First, I'd like to start off by discussing a little bit about our future planning with our facilities department and our facilities in general. We are creating and implementing a long-term facilities plan that will guarantee access and a full continuum of services for every student. We'll do that by developing a facilities plan. Facilities plan will be informed by the facilities condition assessment that's underway, as well as our pre-K to 6 and 7-12 school design study. It will consist of maintenance reports to assist with ensuring buildings are functional and aligned to our vision for 21st century education. This work is important because of our commitment to inclusion and the expansion of early childhood education. And those priority areas have shifted our standards for what spaces are required in every school. Combining elementary schools, for example, in collapsing elementary schools into one building will help us create a K-6 pathway. It'll help us better efficiently use our classrooms and frees up space for student services and supports for our students as they reach their academic goals. Lastly, schools with at least 2 strands are better to support teacher collaboration, staffing levels for inclusive education models, and academic enrichment. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates some operational future planning that is underway for our district. We will continue to invest money in our HVAC systems, our outdoor educational spaces and playgrounds, and invest in our critical infrastructure needs in the district. With our food nutritional, and when our facilities condition assessment is complete, that will help us inform and plan for future facilities projects. Within our food nutritional services department, we'll continue to invest in staff training for on-site cooking in all of our schools. With our technology division or department, we will be refreshing all students' secretary and paraprofessional computers and improve our cybersecurity infrastructure. Our transportation department will continue to work and plan on expanding our electric vehicle pilot. As you recall, we expanded 20 buses into our fleet this school year. With safety services department, we'll be expanding the Office of Emergency Management. And in our human capital and finance departments, we'll be planning for future investments needed to support internal restructuring of those 2 departments based on the strategic planning work currently underway. Next slide, please. So immediate actions we've taken in the Department of Facilities, Transportation, and Food Nutritional Services. 1, partnering with our city colleagues on the Green New Deal for BPS. Increasing our environmental services across the district, the facilities condition assessments, which I mentioned earlier, and developing a facilities priority plan. Immediate action we've taken in utilizing our city capital budget is to install door alarms on our doors, as well as updating security cameras in all of our schools. With our transportation department, we invested in tablets and technology upgrades to increase and monitor ridership information and support with routing that we do in the transportation area. And we've continued to recruit and hire in professional development for drivers and bus monitors. And lastly, like as mentioned before, expand our electric bus fleet. Within our food and nutrition services program, we've focused on waste management in our composting program, and we're heavily pursuing and following up with the good food purchasing program. Next slide. Just to highlight a few highlights and plans for the transportation department. For FY23, we've been able to hire 150 monitors We've also been able to hire 200 bus drivers, including 129 of those 200 were provided with CDL training. As you recall, that was an area that was, the industry was just struggling with having bus drivers, and it caused a lot of our delays and challenges, but we're happy to report these numbers. Another highlight as mentioned, the 20 electric buses that we've put into our fleet, and this represents the largest electric school bus deployment in the Northeast region. And we continue to implement and monitor our new collective bargaining agreements as well, which include increases in wages and benefits and operational changes to facilitate improved services for students with disabilities. For FY24 planning, we are proposing an increase of $12.3 million in the transportation budget. This would be for implementing the driver and bus monitor contracts, updated MBTA contract, support the increased costs to students, to transporting students experiencing homelessness. We also launched our new bus operator contract, which is a 5-year contract that starts July 1, and we significantly restructured it to add significant vendor financial accountability for some of the services provided, or for the services provided. Lastly, funds will go towards ongoing monitoring and hiring and retention for bus drivers and monitors, and we've added with the goal of hiring 149 bus monitors to meet the demand that we have for student needs. Next slide. So just briefly, some of the immediate action steps we've taken to support student support division and our safety division. With student supports, first, we increased the number of supervisor attendants to align with our regional model. This will bring us to 1 supervisor per per each of the 9 regions. We've increased our bullying prevention and intervention work, expanded the use of RJ practices in schools and the central office, developed peer mediation program, and expanding our mentoring program as well. With our safety services, we're also increasing the Office of Emergency Management from 1 person to 5 total. And next slide, please. And so immediate action we've taken around teacher recruitment. We've hosted 7 different recruitment events, and with those events focused on multilingual educators, diversity fairs, and demo days that focus on internal pipelines. Attended over 30 fairs and recruitment of candidates of color. This includes multicultural, multilingual, and diversity-focused fairs. We've entered new agreements and partnerships with Indeed, Handshake, and PCG Consulting to solicit diverse candidates for hard-to-fill positions. We provided individual and group support for retaining and attaining licensure for our employees. We've had 300 or about 400 candidates apply for early hiring pool. 73% of those applicants have already applied for at least 1 job posted for the upcoming school year. Of that, 72% of Black and African-American candidates have applied for at least 1 position. 68% of Asian candidates have applied to at least 1 position. 73% of Hispanic and or Latinx candidates have applied to at least 1 position as well. In addition, we have over 1,200 have connected with BPS staff members at recruiting events this year, and nearly 400 have applied to at least 1 position for the upcoming school year. And lastly, about 58% of BT3 hires for school year 23-24 identify as educators of color. Next slide. Other additional immediate action we've taken around teacher professional development support include the following. Additional retention program for staffing support to reduce attrition rate of educators of color. This is in the form of a peer mediation program for 2nd and 3rd year teachers and counselors of color, retention support for students of support staff, and we added in a staff member, a retention specialist for central office educators of color. With professional development and support, we have our bilingual accelerated community to teacher program that we offer. We have a BPS teaching fellowship to support staff for initial licensure, and teacher cadet program to increase student mentoring, college and career readiness opportunities, and workforce development. Paraprofessional test preparation program, and our MTEL prep support program expansion for emergency licenses and bilingual education. And next slide.
That was our last slide, and I think we'll now turn it back over to you, Chair, for your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilor Liz Braden, you have the floor, and I'm asking everyone if they wanted to wrap it up in one round. I will allow you 10 minutes if that's the case.
My first question would be really about
Councilor Braden, sorry, Councilor Braden, that was a question. Would you like to wrap up your questions within the first round? Would you like 12 minutes or 8?
Well, 12 minutes would be great, yes.
Awesome, thank you.
First question about the facilities assessment. When might we expect the results of the facilities assessment? The other question, really in terms of HVAC in all of our schools, where are we at with HVAC installation in our schools? We are experiencing increasing heat waves outside of the deep sort of July and August summer months. We have May and September, we might anticipate very hot temperatures, and we have summer programs in our schools during July and August. So where are we at with HVAC? It's going to be an important health issue and a functional space if students need to have adequate cooling in our schools. The question I had was, I don't know, in terms of the ABA programs, I know that we're transporting our students out of Alston Brighton because we don't, since the Jackson Man closed, we don't have an ABA program in Alston, in this neighbourhood, Alston Brighton, of any of the schools. Are there plans to establish an ABA program? I think our students are going to the Curley or asking to go to the Curley, which would be the nearest school in JP, but that's usually oversubscribed and they end up going further away. And especially in the younger grades, it's very, it's not acceptable. Many of our parents use public transit. It takes 40 minutes in a car. It could take you an hour and a half on the buses to get to the schools. And these are working families, some of them working 2 jobs. So it's really difficult for them to attend teacher meetings, etc., for their students. The other question I had was with regard to reading support in the higher grades. I know we have this ideal that our children should be reading at grade level by 3rd or 4th grade, but the reality is that many of our students are entering high school and they don't have reading proficiency. Are we investing in reading specialists for those higher grades to help those students improve their reading proficiency? I think it's naive to think that all of our students are magically going to learn how to be proficient readers in later grades, and may need help with that. I had a question about compensatory education for our special education students who were greatly impacted by COVID. I don't know, are we factoring in some compensatory education for our special education students due to COVID? And I had a question about related service providers. My understanding is related service providers are the OTs, PTs, speech pathologists, maybe behavioural specialists. They're in the central office budget. It would be really helpful to have a breakdown of how many how many special related service providers you have, and their roles, what profession they're in, and how many you have on staff, and how they're assigned to different students, different schools. The inclusion model, like I'm feeling that we're having a robust inclusion program for all of our schools is really important, but it will take a significant investment in our making sure that we have adequate related service providers and adequate supports to make sure that those students are successful. So those are a list of a good chunk of questions, Madam Chair. I think that might be all for now.
Councillor, I'm wondering, you asked a lot of good questions on the academics side. This afternoon at 1, there's a hearing where Dr. Linda Chen, our Senior Deputy Superintendent for Academics, will be in attendance, and she's the right person to answer the questions around related service providers, inclusion strategy, and your reading specialist questions. These are all questions that we've gotten from school leaders as well, so she'll be ready to take that on. I can say sort of briefly, reading specialists in the higher grades is something that we have been talking about more recently to make sure students who are entering high school not at grade level or not with the sort of fundamentals of reading, that they have resources. It's part of our Reimagine School funding project as well. The more sort of the second half questions, the ABA program question for Alston Brighton, I knew is sort of the blend of academics and operations. And so I'll just say, we don't currently have plans to open a new ABA program in Alston Brighton. We are constantly evaluating where students live relative to their needs and what spaces are available. So as we think about the rebuilding of the elementary school on the Jackson Man site for one of our existing schools, I know the question about ABA services will definitely be a part of that. In the meantime, and you alluded to this with your question about inclusion, our goal is to make sure that students are served close to home in the least restrictive environment. And so we have traditionally thought about students always needing these substantially separate programs when they have higher needs. We're moving away from that sort of thinking, that way of planning, and really thinking about the student needs. So where our goal in the rollout of inclusion over the next few years is to make sure the students who are in Alston Brighton with high needs are able to be served by the schools in Alston Brighton, regardless of what their individual needs are, that we really tailor the academic experience around them. And as I said, Dr. Linda Chen will be able to talk about that more. Your opening questions, I think, were more academically focused, so I'll turn it over to Sam, who's nodding, ready to jump in on those first couple questions.
Yeah, thanks for those questions, Councilor Braden. So the short answer around the facilities condition assessment, that will be ready in August. So we'll have that complete, and then the pre-K to 6 study will be wrapped up later on late fall next year. With regard to the HVAC and AC air conditioning installations, we have 40 schools that are mechanically cooled, an additional 80 that we're putting air conditioners in, and with roughly about 15 schools remaining for AC installation. So most of those are ongoing now. Most of them are in. We have about 15 schools that are not done. And we do have 10 schools that their electrical footprint doesn't allow for the air conditioners. So we're working with Eversource and other utilities and grants to see how we can support those schools in adding some HVAC capacity there. So in short, that's kind of where we are with those projects.
So, and a follow-up question, Sam, with regard to the HVAC, are we using window HVAC units are not very energy efficient? I don't know, are we paying any strategies to try and be as energy efficient as possible with HVAC units?
Yes, we are as we go forward. Yeah, as we go forward and as we look for other models to support schools that can't handle some of the load with the HVAC, with the ACs, with those schools, we'll continue to do that. So it'll all be part of the facility condition assessment on how we roll those out going forward.
And I had a quick question about the outdoor facilities and playgrounds. I know that the Baldwin, the Early Learning Pilot Academy at the Baldwin has, their playground is really, really bad. And I was thinking about trying to get CPA money for it, but I don't know, could we put that on the list for a look-see and make sure that it's a wonderful early learning space, but their outdoor playground is pretty sad. So I'd give a plug for that to see if we can get it, get an improvement on their playground, and whether or not it'd be appropriate for us to proceed with trying to push for CPA money for that.
Short answer, Councilor, yes, we'd love your support in pushing for the CPA dollars, and happy to support with that application. We do and have had an assessment of all of our playgrounds and all of our outdoor infrastructure, so we do have a lot of that mapped out and assessed. So right now it's just a matter of figuring out how we prioritize them with our opportunity index and prioritize a lot of the work, and the FCA will again support with some of those decisions.
Yeah, it's a neighborhood where they don't have any parks, so they can't walk to a park. It's sort of important. Madam Chair, how am I doing for time?
You have a minute.
A minute, okay. I'm just curious about the transportation question. I know we spend a massive amount of money on transportation in our schools, to and from school. And how many students are we busing every day, and what is the availability of school transit for after school programs and for sports access to sports after school?
So currently, we transport 21,000 students across 230 schools, including non-BPS schools. Is that universe? And can you repeat the question about the after-school programs? We do.
Yeah, after school programs, athletics participation, etc. It's really, or going to after school programs at maybe the Y or the Boys and Girls Club or whatever. What's the availability of transit for those? And yeah, I think that's basically it.
Yeah, so we do provide transportation for our athletic programs and teams, and for families that their students attend like the YMCA or out of BPS programs. We have alternative drop-off locations that there's a process that families can sign up for, forms to fill out, and then instead of being dropped off at a particular bus stop, they can request to get dropped off at an after-school program.
Okay, and how many students? Do you have any idea how many students that involves?
I couldn't tell you right now, but we can get that information to you. But we do provide that service and options.
Yeah. Very good. Madam Chair, I think that's my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Council President Flynn, are you going to be around for the second round, or would you like to go straight 12 minutes?
I'll go straight to questionings this round, and I won't need time for the second round.
Thank you, Council President Flynn. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Following up on Council Braden's questions, how much did we spend the last academic year on transportation?
Chief, could that information readily available?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Hold on one sec. I'll pull up. You're talking about the current for FY22. What was our end of year spending on transportation?
Yeah.
Just give me one moment. I can pull that up, and we can maybe ask your next question, and then I'll be ready with that.
You want me to go on to another question, Nate, and then I'll come back to you? Okay. Last week, we had at least one day that was in the 90s. Kids are still in school. Students are still in school. Teachers are still teaching. Were there any issues at all that BPS is aware of? BPS received any information at all that the HVAC systems were not working or were not working properly?
So I know we had a few schools, all the ACs were up and working. And, we're finalizing the turnover season for HVACs in our schools. We start that usually around middle of May, and they're done usually around now. So all the ACs were up and on. But like everything else, so if a system breaks down or fails, we have to, circle back with the schools and make sure that we make those repairs and get the systems up and running again if they break down.
So they were up and running, but did BPS receive any complaints from the school, from students, teachers, or parents that the HVAC system was not working properly?
I know one school that I was aware of that was a question, but it was on, and then we just needed repairs. But we try to remind our families, to the extent possible, when there's a heat wave or hot temperatures, to, it's an individual family decision whether to send their students to school or not, and we make every attempt to make sure that there's cooling fans available. We make sure that windows are operable to help cool off where needed. And then we give guidance around how much time is spent outside for recess and those kind of things, and water availability as well.
Well, so, okay, one complaint really about one school. Do the students have access to healthy drinking water during that day?
Yes.
How do they have access to healthy drinking water?
Water bubblers, our fountain systems that we've installed recently, so a combination of those two things.
When's the last time we checked the quality of the water from the bubblers?
Those tests are done routinely. I can get you the exact dates and times we do that, but I know we test them on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'd like to see the results of that when we tested them. I want to make sure that our students are drinking healthy water. Are there any schools that don't have healthy water in their bubblers?
No, all the water bubblers are healthy, sir.
It's all healthy water. There are no issues.
No.
Okay. There were issues in the past, is that correct?
Yeah, since then we've engaged in a whole water change, and we've updated our fountains. We've done a lot more testing. We're one of the only school districts that actually engaged in doing that work, and we have a new vendor that helps us support with some of that work. So we're proud of where we are now compared to where we were a few years back.
Thank you. Nate, have you heard from that answer?
Yes, thank you, Counselor. Based on our end of year report, we spent $120.2 million transporting BPS students. We also spent another $13 million transporting non-BPS students for a total of $133 million in transportation spending for FY22.
During that period of time, were there any athletes, BPS athletes, that didn't get to their game of practice because of transportation issues?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Mr. Kuda. Yes, there were, Councilor Flynn, and a lot of that, I would describe it as part of our bus driver shortage challenges that we were experiencing, especially like last year and the year before. But since we've stabilized and increased so much bus drivers, the number of missed practices for games or practices have significantly gone down. I can't tell you exactly how many we've dropped, but they're significantly less that have been dropped.
I don't want any student missing a practice or a game for any reason going forward. That's unacceptable. We have a huge budget for transportation. Every student that wants to play a sport or an after-school activity that needs access to transportation, that should be there. There's really no excuse for that. I don't have any tolerance for that. So my priority going forward is to making sure that that never happens again, and that every student has access to transportation, especially going to sports or music or other after-school activities. That should be a priority for us. Is that a priority for you, for BPS, and will that not happen again?
It is a priority for us, sir. And we continue to work with our bus drivers, our bus driver union. We continue to work with our transportation company to make sure that we transport as many kids as possible to all the games and practices that they're participating in.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council President Flynn. Councilor Mejia, I think you were next.
Good morning, and thank you to the BPS administration. Happy to see you all. I'm going to most likely use 2 rounds, Councilor Anderson, just in case. So most of my beginning questions are really around the recruitment and retention of our personnel of color, both on the central staff level as well as the school level. So I'm curious, Dr. Lupina, if you could just talk to me a little bit about kind of what protocols and procedures are put in place for disciplinary practices, because what I'm hearing from a lot of folks is issues of retaliation. I've been hearing from male teachers of color who are having some difficulties in different schools, and sometimes are being pushed out. So I'm just curious about kind of like what infrastructure do we have in place and how we are holding ourselves accountable to ensure that our staff do not feel retaliated against or afraid to speak up when they're being targeted, or that appears to be targeted. I am also curious about and I'm not sure if anyone here could talk to me about some updates in regards to the mass exodus of central staff administrators, particularly of color, and kind of what we are doing to get ahead of that. I know that there was a consultant that was hired to do some reporting and to just do some, research, but, we're spending money on the report, and, I'm just curious about what that return on the investment is, and more importantly, what are we going to do about what we're learning. And then in regards to, I'm going to just switch gears really quick here, in regards to, you had mentioned in your opening comments, collapsing schools and collaborating and, maximizing on our facilities. And, there's some rumblings about O'Brien being moved over to West Roxbury. And this is, even though it was allegedly embargoed information, I just want to say that everybody in the community knows about it because everybody's been blowing up my phone about it. So that said, I'd love to hear kind of what your community engagement vision is for hearing from those existing stakeholders about a path forward on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I'll defer to my colleague, Ms. Canty, in a second, but with regard to employee discipline and employee discipline matters, we have different collective bargaining agreements that spell out what those progressive discipline measures are, and we make sure that those collective bargaining agreement disciplinary practices are followed. And we closely monitor that with our labor relations team. We have our labor relations teams ready to support school leaders in a lot of those endeavors. Our goal is always to retain and attract and keep our educators of color. And unfortunately, sometimes, disciplinary actions and supports are needed to different staff members. And we try to work with the schools to make sure that we provide support. We provide support in the cases of disciplinary matters. We follow our collective bargaining obligations. So, Ms. Canty, I don't know if you want to say anything else to that, but that's in short how I could answer that question. Okay, and with regard to retaliation, any claims, we do have our equity office that helps us support in any retaliatory claims that may come out of the schools and or central offices. So we have a real good process there. We've over the years staffed up that department to be able to really look closely at a lot of retaliatory allegations and make recommendations for us as well. The last part around us collapsing schools, based on what I described in my presentation, was more around just give an example of how, and if we combine and consolidate schools, how it creates those K-6 pathways that we're looking for and frees up other spaces for support services and or enrichment activities for students. And with regard to any proposals going forward, there will be continuous ongoing dialogue with different impacted school communities, and having those conversations. So that's our commitment to the community. So I guess that's how I would answer that question as well. Thank you.
Are you going to talk to us a little bit about the plan of action for the rumblings that we've been hearing in regards to O'Brien? Or is that going to be Nate?
No, I mean, I think once announcements are ready to be made about that, we will. I'm not in a position to talk about that right now. I think the more ongoing conversations will happen with the community with regard to that, if that's the case.
Yeah, so, but I'm just curious about in regards to operations and how we're going to engage community, you know, what is the plan around that?
Yeah, usually we develop design teams to work with school communities that consists of the school, their stakeholders, central office staff, and we think through different scenarios and recommendations on any proposals going forward. So once the Green New Deal, once the facilities condition assessment and the pre-K to 6 and 7-12 studies are complete, that's when we'll be going through a real deep analysis of what any future potential changes may look like in BPS.
And can you just talk to me a little bit about, and this will be my last question because I'm sure I'm probably over my first round, around quality assurance. I'm interested in, I've asked Nate this in the past in terms of just exit interviews or surveys that we can conduct with families. And I'm just curious, what, if any, data you have about why employees are leaving BPS? Do you have any way of gathering that information, and how are you storing it, and how are you learning from it? So I'm just curious about that sort of mechanism in place where we can learn what we could be doing differently.
Ms. Canty, I'm not sure if you can explain what currently exists, but we could talk about like future planning as well.
Good morning. We are currently in the process.
I'm not sure, but I think, is Councilor Anderson, are you lagging on your end?
A platform where we can engage employer leaders.
Ms. Canty?
Can you hear me?
We cannot. It's lagging. It's hard to hear you.
Can you repeat that? Try it again. If not, I could talk about what we are going to be doing going forward. But go ahead.
I think I'm having some problems.
We can hear you now.
Okay. So the district is engaging in the process of developing surveys and things of that nature to engage our employees as they're leaving. We're in the last leg of that process right now, to have a platform and a system in place that would allow us to gather, to harness that information and be able to share with the public to share as that information is completed. But we have started that engagement process to figure out how we get that information to at some point. The other thing is BPS, one of the reasons that we do lose people is that BPS is really a training ground for a lot of our employees. People do come here because of the breadth of knowledge that you can gain from BPS. And oftentimes people do take that knowledge and they do go to other districts. We are trying to find ways to maintain, keep that knowledge and retain it. But, you know, we applaud ourselves in being a training ground for educators throughout the Commonwealth. If you go anywhere, most people would have gotten their training at BPS. It's something we're happy, we're proud of, and I know it can be a deficit for us at the same time, but it is BPS, in fact, foster education for a lot of the other districts in the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Ms. Canty. We didn't hear the last sentence. If you can clarify, and Ms. Councilman here, your time is up.
Oh,
no, I think. Go ahead, Councilman Year.
Sorry, the chair will call on to who's to speak. Thank you, Ms. Canty. Ms. Canty, can you please repeat your last sentence? And we'll have to move on. Councilman here will come back in the second round. My last sentence was that, we're in
incubator for educators. People do come here to BPS because it's such a great training ground for educators. And as a result, people do in fact move on. We're trying to find ways to make sure that we can keep some of our people here and the good work that we're doing, but we do understand because of the wealth of knowledge that we provide other individuals that work here, that some of them are going to leave, but we are trying to find the best policies and the best situations to allow our employees to stay.
Thank you, Ms. Canty. Councilor Mejia, we'll come back to you, okay? Councilor Jen, would you like to go one round, or are you staying here for the second round?
One round is fine.
12 minutes, you have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you to BPS for being here. I wanted to start off with a question about something regarding, we've heard from some parents about the exam school process and about the letters that went out incorrectly to families that believe that they got in. So this is just like a holistic question. What are we doing to prevent that from happening in the future? It can be a real letdown for our parents and our families when they do get that misinformation. And secondly, what have we learned about and what are we continuing to learn and see from the new admissions process for the exam schools?
Good morning, Counselor. I can answer the first question, and then we'd have to get back to you on the second. I know with the exam school notification letters and review, what we've done immediately is we hired another auditor to make sure that they work more closely with us and our team to make sure we're viewing data, double and triple checking the data before we release any information out. So we've added that new layer of review and accountability there. And we'll have to get back to you on the other question you asked, because that's not an operational area that I can speak to right now.
Okay, and you can let me know if you think this is better reserved for academics, but I'd love to know if we have publicly available data on the number of applicants to the exam schools, the number of acceptances and rejections, and the breakdown by tiers in schools, and the demographic data. To the chair, if we could get that information, that would be helpful. And yes. I asked that question as someone who is an at-large city councilor who receives questions on this issue, as someone who is an alum of Boston Latin School and someone who also believes that there oftentimes is too much focus on just our exam schools as the quality options for our kids. So I want to talk about what are we doing on the high school level to expand the number of quality high school options that our kids have and to make sure that we are improving those outcomes. I am personally encouraged by the work that we are doing on the early education front, on the K-5. Like, obviously not perfect, but I think that we are making great strides. I'd like us to see us making great strides on the high school front. And I think there are really great examples like East Boston High School. I think, of course, with BAA, there are other really like shining examples, but are there improvements that are happening that we're not seeing, that aren't being discussed, where we can, talk to our parents, and our constituents and have confidence in what we're trying to do on the high school level as well?
Just quickly back to the information around the admissions. We do have a school committee meeting coming up on Wednesday, and that will be part of the presentation. So make sure you have that information. And with regard to the high school work, that's again an area that we'll have to talk more broadly with the academic team and that cross-functional work when we get to that hearing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Question next is on transportation. I know a lot of my colleagues asked, but just so that I'm clear, what is the current on-time percentage rate for BPS buses?
We'd have to get you the latest, but I know we've been hovering between like 90 and 93, depending on the day. But we can give you the specific breakdown. We do have a memo that we share. But before accounting for missing GPS data, we're at about like 91% total for the year and 93% since the start of December.
And I'm sure there are dips and lows. There are moments we know, particularly around vacation, after school breaks, where we're going to be experiencing a lot of call outs. Like, what are we because we have the data, and my understanding is that the data team actually for BPS on this is quite stellar. Like, they have the data and the information. What are we doing with that data to like, okay, if we know that there's going to be a serious drop in the number of available bus drivers after winter break or after April vacation, like what are we proactively doing to ensure that?
Yeah, this gets back constant to the information we talked about where we've added significantly more drivers. So our goal is to hire 721 drivers, and that will help us create a standby pool that's enough to help cover different areas. So right now, out of the 721 drivers we're looking for, we've hired 714, and we have another 40 or so in the pipeline to get cleared as well. So we're confident that with these staffing levels and with additional people coming on board, we'll be significantly staffed so that we can absorb some of those call outs and absences when they do arrive during those vacation times.
And so you think we'll be able to meet the state mandated 95% on time requirement?
That's our goal every day, man.
Okay. And, is like, it breaks my heart, and I know it breaks the heart of a lot of city councilors, and it actually makes us really upset when we get calls from parents who can't send their kids to school because a bus isn't available. And I know this is not the ideal situation, but do we have alternatives? Is there a program where we're able to pay or some sort of voucher for a cab pickup? What are the alternatives so that it's not just solely on the backs of our parents?
Yeah, I mean, luckily, that number has significantly dropped. So we had fewer than 3% of the trips have been uncovered this year, and we're making steady progress in that area. Families of students with specialized transportation in their IEP can also get reimbursement for those kind of cases. And we're in the process now of having some ongoing conversations and negotiations with Lyft to provide that as a resource as well. So that's not finalized yet, but that is something that we're actively working on with Lyft.
Okay, I'm encouraged to hear that. I think one of my colleagues asked this question, but I didn't hear the date when we would get the information. Last year when we were having budget hearings, we were supposed to get a facilities assessment for each and every school as a baseline, and then compare it to what we believe each school should have. Do we have that data? Do we have that information yet?
Well, what we have right now is our publicly available dashboard that speaks to different conditions of each of our schools, and I believe that's what we referenced in the previous hearings. So we can make sure you have access to that dashboard, which is live and available for the public. But the facilities condition assessment won't be available until August. So I think those are two different sources of information that you may be inquiring about. So we can make sure you have the former if you don't have access to that.
I believe last year when we were in budget, it was the intent for us to have the facilities assessment done now so that it could help inform the budget process, correct?
Not quite. We wanted to make sure it was done to prepare for the future year budgets. And we wanted to make sure we gave everyone an update that was happening at the time, because we launched it at that time when we last had the hearing. So right now we're in the process of finalizing that work, and then that information will be available to help us plan for projects going forward and help inform the broader facilities plan.
And what are we learning from our facilities assessment about the quality and the state of our schools?
Until we see the results of the FCA, it's hard to predict what they'll say until we actually get the report. But I know based on our internal review that we did that led to the dashboard, our buildings need some investments. We've noted that. We've seen the different areas and different categories in our dashboard, and we're working to address immediate problems where we need to, and where we've made some successes. We're happy celebrating. I mean, we've added outdoor spaces at different schools. We've added a lot of science labs. We've got a lot of other investments that are needed, like such as the air quality work that we've done. We've been nationally recognized for that work in that space with air quality. I'd love to just publicly thank our facilities team on that as well. So we have a lot more work to do, and we're happy to finally have the tools and tracking mechanism to help us show the work. We also have our Asset Essentials work order system that we've implemented last year. That way we have an electronic way of making sure people are entering information, it's tracked, it's logged appropriately, and appropriate responses are followed up on. So we've done a lot of technological advancements over the last couple of years, and we're happy to push that work forward.
Thank you. I'm, along that thread, I am concerned because of the report that we saw last week about how the state is underfunding and underinvesting in construction for schools in Black and brown neighborhoods and Black and brown cities like ours, Boston, the city of Boston. which is depressing information. How are we counteracting that? What are we doing to make sure, I say this over and over again, our facilities need to be dignity affirming for all of our students. And if they're not, that just shows how we value or undervalue them. My elementary school, the Taylor School, looks the exact same way as it did when I went there, and my niece goes there now, and that is not something that we want for any of our children. And when we see that damning report from the Globe, it just sort of confirms the biases and the discrimination that we know exist in our education system when it comes to caring for our Black and brown kids. So what are we doing as a result of that report and finding out that information in BPS?
Yeah, I think the short answer is we're better preparing ourselves to submit different opportunities with the MSBA. We've met with the MSBA extensively to go over kind of our understanding of processes and procedures, and which we verified. And I think on our end is making sure that we're organized with the correct information to submit for both alterations and repair projects that they have going on at MSBA, as well as core projects. So I think we've organized ourselves centrally in a way that gives us better capacity to do some of that work in alignment. And we're in a better position to submit more applications for those opportunities. So we'll continue to do our part by providing the applications, submitting the information. And I know we have the city's commitment to help us support with some of the match dollars that was highlighted in the article, where some districts and towns aren't able to actually fund some of the requests that go in. But I think Boston's uniquely positioned based on the mayor's commitment to the $2 billion in Green New Deal, and that'll help us leverage some of the MSBA dollars as well. So we're excited about being staffed structurally in a way that we can take more advantage of those MSBA opportunities.
That's great to hear. I also just want to make sure that we are doing it in a way, of course, and it sounds like you are, that is really centering equity, because sometimes the loudest voices and the loudest are the ones who are able to organize and get what they need. And so in a lot of our schools and communities where they maybe don't have a strong parent council because the parents are working around the clock or don't have that there's still attention being paid in service to those schools as well.
Yeah, we'll continue to do that, and we'll continue to be the champion and voice for those schools and school communities here at Central. So at Central Office, we are going to be taking more of an active role in the engagement. As you know, Superintendent elevated that family community engagement to a deputy role and position. And my colleague, Dr. Tavares, has been great at making sure we're understanding the needs of schools and helping to lift up the voices of the community with regard to these type of matters as well.
Okay, thank you.
And they're part of the team.
Thank you. I have one last question regarding like food and nutrition. During the pandemic, many of the fresh food programs at school cafeteria shut down for prepackaged foods. Is the fresh food program back at the level of fresh local food it was at before the pandemic? Want to also shout out to the Chittick School that I visited on Friday that has a great homemade muffin breakfast program that I think is really fantastic. But want to make sure that all of our schools are getting back to a place where we're able to provide fresh options. And I know that we're working with outdoor gardens and supporting that program for farming at our schools, but wanted to just get a perspective of all of our BPS schools.
Yeah, so currently right now, we're trying to get back to the pre-pandemic levels of preparing and having all of our site staff to do on-site cooking. The challenge currently now is more around being able to staff up some of those kitchens where we made investments in. So we're actively doing that. We just recently hired our new executive director of food nutritional service, Annalise Tanner. We're happy to welcome her on board. And she has a real keen desire and passion around fresh food and on-site cooking. So she's going to help us continue to push the work forward, and hopefully we can get the staffing levels we need to all of our schools, so we'll be at a position to do on-site cooking throughout the district. But we have made increases. I couldn't tell you exactly how much we have or don't have online, but we can get you that information at another time.
I believe that is my time. Is that right, Chair?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy.
Do you have a final question? You can wrap it up now.
Just really about, like, there's been several instances around data, like kind of related to the exam school question, but like not paying vendors on time, not being able to pay our teachers on time, our staff on time, which is a really big problem. And I think it's all related to data integrity. And then I look at the BPS budget and the increase, and I see, which in some ways great to sort of handle the need, but then worried about how ESSER funding and the ESSER cliff is going to leave us in a place of not having. So, like, how are we handling our data, and how are we handling the integrity that we should have in our data and the staff necessary to support that work?
Yeah, a couple of things I can speak to about our data and data integrity in different areas. One, I know the Office of Data and Accountability and Office of Instructional Information Technology are going to receive $2 million over 3 years to create a new cloud-based analytic data warehouse and implement Power BI for dashboarding, different things that we want. So I know we're making investments in that area, and part of the strategic improvement plan that we're working on with DESE calls for a lot of that work to happen, and we've made some inroads with that area. With regard to payroll and paying of vendors, one of the immediate action steps that we've done now is really, as part of our strategic planning work in the Division of Finance and the Office of Human Capital, we're just learning, just quite frankly, that the volume of work that is needed currently does not reflect the current staffing capacity in some of these departments in certain areas, and certain workflows are just not as efficient as they need to be, and we're working with them to figure out how we build upon that. So, for example, we recently announced the expansion of our business services department that will help us with our contract management, help us with accounts payable, and really start to stabilize the true capacity needed to do some of the volume of work in our business service side of the house. And we anticipate making more of those changes as we wrap up the strategic planning work with the Office of Finance and Office of Human Capital as well.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Superintendent, and thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to ask all my questions. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Councilor Chen. Councilor Coletta, I'm asking everyone if they'd like to just stay for one round with 12 minutes or a second round. I'll give you 7 minutes now and 5 later.
I can do one full round, Madam Chair.
Okay, you got it. You have 12 minutes.
Thank you. And thank you to the BPS team. I came prepped with some exam school questions as well, but since this is just BPS operations, I'll focus in on that. Last week, I gave a shout out, but I'll do it again to East Boston's own Rashawn Martin for his efforts in teacher recruitment. I have no questions there. The slide was very informative, and I do appreciate the efforts to recruit a strong diversity of candidates. My questioning will be centered around personnel, increases, transportation, student support and safety, and then some specific questions in district on facilities and HVAC. So the first of which being just around personnel. So a critique of BPS is that a large portion of our precious funds are spent primarily in central office, where there's a position for a position, and then there's multiple positions that report to it. So I was pleased to see a 5% decrease in central office, including a 55 decrease in business managers, which was interesting, and 4% in the superintendent's office. There was a 9% personnel increase for administrators. I would love to better understand the strategic thinking around that and what prompted that and what those funds will be going towards.
I'll let Sam comment on the strategy around senior leadership, but one thing I just wanted to know about the central budgets located in the business services, business managers budget. That line item includes a lot of places where we centrally budget for things like benefits and other costs that are distributed across the district, but we manage it centrally through our team. So shifts in budget, and certainly the size of the business manager budget, is not a full indication of the size of our business services team, but rather an indication of who manages the large cost of payroll, pension benefits, things like that, or unemployment benefits. And so the other question was around the strategy around administrators, which includes our senior leadership and our department leadership teams. Sam, I'll turn it over to you if you want to.
Yeah. Thanks, Chief Porter. Thanks for the question, Counselor. I think the way I would describe it is that the central office has a lot of moving parts and pieces and a lot of different work happening in different areas that we're learning now, just from doing a deeper analysis with the current deputy superintendent structure that Superintendent Skipper put in place, that we're really understanding what our limitations are with some of the work we're trying to do, given the staffing capacity that we have central. So over the years, I haven't seen, in my experience, the level of detail that we're paying attention to the work that needs to get done versus the staffing capacity that we have in central office. I think what you're seeing is our desire to make sure that we can balance actual work that we want to get done with having the right number and type of people to do the work as well. So that's why you would see that increase in central office administration costs as well. It's just long overdue structural alignment that we have to do with the amount of work that we're trying to get done on behalf of our students.
Okay, and would you say that that work is being done with these administrators? Are they in central office? Are they closer to the schools? Or are they headmasters? Are they district supervisors, district administrators?
I think it's a combination of all the above. Without knowing the specific 9% that you're talking about and what those positions are, I can kind of go through them with you maybe offline. But it'll be a combination of central people as well as central people that do provide services to schools like Mr. Puda described earlier.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I did hear feedback from just school communities that decision-making happen in close partnership, and that typically happens at a district and then headmaster level. So would appreciate walking through that. The second line of questioning has to do with transportation. I saw that I think it is bus monitors or bus drivers account for 52% increase in our spending. To clarify, is this to account for both hiring the 149 monitors as well as raising wages to recruit and retain? I just would love to get more clarity around that.
Yeah, it's to satisfy the collective bargaining agreement and changes. So a lot of it's to that. We added 149 bus mod FTEs for fiscal year 24, so that accounts for that. So it's a combination of adding for more bus monitors that we obviously desperately need, and as well as implementing that new collective bargaining agreement that changed their rate of pay to attract more bus monitors to work with our district. So the collective bargaining calls for an increase of about $19 an hour from $15 an hour, for example. So we made a significant jump in pay for that group of people. So it's a combination of the bus monitors contract, the bus drivers contract, and our need to add staffing levels to support the work that we need as well.
Okay, and I do just want to say $19 an hour is very low for folks who live in the city of Boston. And I know that typically happens through collective bargaining, but a lot of our monitors are parents and have different jobs. So $19 to me is still not good enough, but I know it has to happen through collective bargaining. That's just a comment. You don't need to say anything on that. I think the other part about transportation is that we are dealing with the Sumner Tunnel closure through the summertime. And so I know that there's a lot of students who depend on, especially our students with disabilities who depend on summer programming. So I'm just wondering what the planning has been like for that and how you've been working with families to anticipate this very painful closure that we're already dealing with right now, even before it's begun.
Yeah, as you know, we're one of the top four in traffic. So we've been working with our transportation team and the vendor to plan for the closure, different routes that the drivers can take to come in and out of East Boston. So to minimize buses having to travel to and from East Boston, and we're adding additional routes as well. So it's been part of our summer planning going on. We've taken that into consideration, but like everything else, until we get going into the work, we'll have to continue to make adjustments as we go forward. And the students with disabilities that are assigned to the ESY programs, we tried our best to make sure that we assigned them to schools that were closer to their houses, so it would help minimize some of the transportation needs as well.
Great. And are there any extra fees or charges that we'll need to make because of the Sumner Tunnel closure, and who is paying for them?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by extra fees. If we BPS do not charge for our summer
Or
program.
any spending, I guess, any additional spending on buses or due to the extra time?
We won't need to spend for more buses. It's already accounted for in the current budget that we have for summer school and transportation. So we're going to be adding that on our existing budget.
Okay, thank you. My last question, I'm sorry, I have two more, so I'll make it quick. I am pleased to see that there are new line items, or at least there's new support for student safety, including supervisors of attendance and expansion of bullying prevention and restorative practices. I know that was something that we as a council have been calling for, and it's a citywide push. Are you able to provide any details about what that looks like per district, and primarily my district in East Boston, Charlestown, and the North End, about where those, who will be benefiting from these increases?
So district-wide, the goal is to make sure we can expand RJ practices across the district, both in schools and central office. So each region will have some folks dedicated to working on that with the school-based teams. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but it will be district-wide by region, and it'll be a combination of central office folks working with these RJ specialists with the school-based teams as well, and social workers that we have added, and student support teams and different school-based administrators and teachers. So we're excited about the work. So it'll be happening district-wide, but if you want more specifics around it, we're happy to provide that to you.
Thank you. If I could request that through the chair, but I do understand it's going to be a combination of central folks in the RJ team with school-based teams as well. And then my last question is focused on the HVAC investments. About, East Boston, we bear the brunt of higher CO2 emissions because of the airport, under flight paths and all of that, and transit networks. And this also includes Charlestown as well, too, with 93. Has there been special consideration to expedite work around or in schools around these transit corridors? What will that look like? Is that all contingent with the assessment that we're all waiting for?
I think the short answer is we had a schedule of putting all of our AC units up, and we're down to like the final 15 or so is what I remember the number is. And I think I couldn't speak specifically about how many are done in East Boston, but our goal was to put them up as quickly as possible across the district before the start of summer. So we're on track to meet that at the schools that we can accommodate for. So I would just have to go back and look at that list of what that looks like. But the longer term HVAC projects, that we base on the facility condition assessment as well. So we'll definitely be looking at it through our opportunity index as well, to how we prioritize different projects. So those are the way we prioritize our projects, through the racial equity planning tool, as well as the opportunity opportunity index as well.
Thank you. I would just encourage, with the environmental justice lens and all of this, those kids in Charlestown next to 93, and then in East Boston, I'm thinking the PJK, they are underneath the flight path. And so if we're thinking about the air that we breathe and high quality air, I would think that should be central and number one. So just putting that out there, and thank you for your answers, everybody. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Cullen. And I also just want to give a shout out to Rashawn Martin as well, because he does fabulous work. So just publicly want to do that.
Thank you, Councilor Coletta. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So let me just pick back up on some of the questions that I had. I think we were cutting up, so I really didn't get to hear Ms. Canty towards the end. And we had talked about how our BPS staff, we become an incubator. And while I really do appreciate that visual of us really cultivating the next generation, I would love to hear from you. What are we going to do to retain them in terms of salary, in terms of just creating more culturally competent environments, particularly for staff of color? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yes. we are trying to create a space for our educators of color where, whereas like we've created spaces such as affinity groups for our educators of colors that they can get together and talk about some of the challenges that they face. We're creating spaces where, you know, people can feel comfortable about some of the things, being comfortable in the space which they work in, which has been very important to us. And we've been doing that work for quite a while now, and we have continued to do that work. The other thing that we've been doing is we're creating 9 equity specialists in the district, which will be addressing culture-based issues for educators of color, as well as for employees within the central office as well. So there are a lot of things that we've had in place and that we're continuing to put in place to like create a space that people may feel, people will feel safe, and people will feel like, you know, that that their ideas, their thought process is appreciated, and that the district is really trying to create a safe space for people of color.
Let's talk a little bit about safe space, because how do you define safe space? Just so that, because I hear that a lot, and I would love to see how you envision that in practice. Because I've been in some of your educator affinity groups, across the different spaces where I've been in community with folks, and so I've seen some of that work and some of that partnership and collaboration and fellowship that's happening in these spaces. But those spaces are very specific, and they are in that community. So I'm curious, when you start acclimating into the wider community and having to navigate and work with some folks who there's a culture shift here, right? And I'm going to be 100% honest, is that we are talking about meeting this moment, but there's still a lot of people in BPS that don't really see our kids or our families as assets, right? And this is racial. This is the historical narrative about, communities of color. And so I'm just curious, how do we create a space for staff to feel embraced and empowered when we are still working within a system that is not as embracing as this moment requires us to be?
And let me say, it's not without challenge. Like, this work is, it's hard, and it's grueling, and it's not without challenge. And, every day I think the district has made strides. Haven't seen other district and working here. This district has made substantial stride to like really get to a place where there are some places where this conversation is not even being had. And the fact that like we are having these conversations about how do we create these spaces for individuals, how do we, empowering our staff, like giving them the tools to be able to have these conversations is something that BPS have been doing for many years, and that BPS continues to do. And by how I define space, a safe space for our employees and our staff, is like having a place where people can talk about some of these challenges. And that's not always something you see in a lot of other environments. And having these affinity groups is a place that employees can feel like they can talk about some of these issues, some of these and that's something we, over years we created. And we're not saying there's not challenges. The district is still, it is a ongoing work. It's an ongoing effort. And,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just, because I'm getting a little anxious about my time.
Sorry.
It's okay. I need to re-listen a little bit. I do appreciate all of the efforts that are being made. Nate and Sam and your team, what I'd like to see in the next presentation for next year, hopefully if I come back to continue to terrorize you, I would love to see some metrics, right? Like here's what the action plan is. Here's some of the outcomes, what we hope to see. Here's how many dollars we're going to invest, because I'm a visual person, and I like to see things in numbers, but then I also would like to have the data to match this, right? Like, because what I struggle with is during these hearings, everything's very much aspirational. And what we're trying to do, I like to get into the weeds of things and to really unpack it so that we are able to match dollar to dollar in terms of investments. So I just want to name that in terms of just what I'd like to see. I'm going to move on to my last round of questions is around ventilation. You know, we've been hearing from a lot of advocates still, Sam, in terms of the quality of air and just access to spaces that are clean and the air is pure and all that good stuff. So I'd love to know if all of our schools this year are going to be online and ready to go with brand new HVAC systems. Is that every school? I'd like to know that. And then I also just want to acknowledge a lot of the work that C-Plan under Leon Rivera's leadership has been doing alongside some of our schools around access to water, better signage for water, warnings about don't drink this water. I mean, the fact that we still have to even do that and that we're driving young people to go to the water bubblers. And sometimes the water bubbler filters are dirty. I've heard a lot about the conditions of these filters. So I'm just curious, what are we doing to get a handle on that? I know that there's some schools that have a whole campaign and they're doing this work, but I'm just curious what BPS is doing in regards to those two issues.
Yeah, sure. So just to clarify, HVAC systems are not in all of our buildings. We have 40 mechanical full HVAC systems, and 80 have a combination of ACs and steam. And for the water and the bubblers, I know we have our contractors that go in repeatedly and clean our bubblers, and they're on a cycle. And there's a process by which, you know, we do that normally. And if schools are concerned about any cleaning of the bubblers, they would just simply report that in, and we can go out and do additional cleaning if necessary. So I think that we are going to continue to work on our ventilation air quality. Like I mentioned earlier, we just recently received the Green Ribbon School Award. We've been nationally recognized for the work that we're doing with our indoor air quality, our indoor air quality sensors, how we're monitoring it, the different investments that we made with the purifiers, with making sure the windows are operable, with increased ventilation with the fans that we have in place. You know, we're really confident that the air quality in our buildings are good, regardless if they're an HVAC building or not. So again, happy to be the recipient of that acknowledgement and nationally, and proud of the team for getting us into the position to be acknowledged in that way. So we're happy to push the work forward and happy to continue to work with any schools. And if schools or communities have issues around the air quality of their schools, we have a team ready to get out and ready to be deployed to assess what's going on and make any course corrections that are necessary.
Councillor Anderson, how much time do I have left? Okay, so I'm gonna take advantage of the fact.
Councillor, no, you're not. Councillor
Okay,
Mejia.
I was about to get in some more. Okay, sorry.
Councillor Mejia, you have another 3 minutes. You're the last one. Indulge. It's okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem.
So let's talk a little bit now about, I'm curious in terms of the Shaw and Taylor, how things are going, if you give me some updates there, and then the Sumner and Philbrook. I'd like to know a little bit about kind of what we're doing in those two spaces in particular.
Yeah, my understanding is that each of the different grouping of schools has their design teams meeting and working with us and as part of that design team, central office departments and school-based staff teams to really talk through the implementation of the mergers at this point. So those conversations are ongoing, and we're looking forward to the results of the planning and moving the schools into the direction of the mergers for not this school year, but the year after.
So can you talk to me a little bit about some of the savings and how we're going to utilize the savings from merging these schools? Like, what's the plan?
At this point, we haven't talked about saving just yet. I think where I understand we are, based on my conversations with the team, is that the design teams are mapping out what they're going to be needing as far as staffing, programming, amenities, et cetera. So until they do that, it's unclear at this point what, if any, savings will be available. So the team has to first assess kind of what the schools will look like first and what's needed. And frankly, until we get that information, we're not able to say what if any, savings exist between those mergers.
Thank you. And, BPS, I'm going to go back to the HVAC and ventilation. Can you just summarize and map out your thinking on ventilation upgrades across the district, specifically how much of the $60 million do you anticipate spending in FY24? Which schools will be receiving upgrades? How are you making these decisions about upgrades? Which models are you considering? Who's deciding on that? Kind of like, if you already went through that and I missed it, I'm sorry. Don't use my time to answer questions that you probably have already addressed. I may have missed that.
Yeah, I think the short answer is we can get you the specific list of schools where we've installed the air conditioners and a specific list of schools that have the HVAC systems, and what schools the electrical grid or their power doesn't support them yet. Yep. Then after the facilities condition assessment is complete, then we'll be in a better position to talk about what additional investments that we'll make after that's complete.
Great, thank you. And when services are not rendered, for example, speech therapy, due to staffing or other issues, how does that impact the budget and where do those funds go? Because what I've heard from a lot of families is that, there were some services that were supposed to be rendered through their IEP, whether it's speech or, other specialized needs that have not been met. So I'm just curious, what happens to those funds?
Yeah, often, and I think this was particularly an issue for us during the pandemic, where students were not in person. There were a lot of needs that weren't covered. We hold a reserve to be able to cover what we call compensatory services. So in the event that a family misses or student misses their services, the IEP team meets to determine what supports the student needs to be able to make up for, stay on track for their academic needs. And then if the IEP requires additional services, either summer programs or additional services before and after school, we would provide that centrally for the student to make sure that they receive those compensatory services. Yeah. I think the special education team will be at the hearing this afternoon and can talk more particular about how that process works. But from a funding perspective, we both hold a reserve to cover it and then make sure the services are provided that way.
Great. Thank you for that, Nate. And then one last question. I'm just curious about our bus monitors and transportation. I know some of this stuff is through collective bargaining and that there's very little that we can do on the council, but I did hear from a lot of bus monitors who are being overworked and underpaid, and also some people in the cafeteria divisions, they're not getting enough hours, so it doesn't make sense, or the schedules are not meshing. So I'm just curious, kind of like, what is your long-term plan, or how are you guys thinking around sustainability for more of the lower wage workers within BPS? And then I'd love to hear a little bit about how we're supporting our bus monitors for FY24.
Yeah, I think the increase that we negotiated with the bus monitors was just a step in the right direction that was long overdue with adjusting the salaries for the bus monitors. And we're happy to have worked with the bus monitor union to get us to that point. And we're thankful that our city colleagues and others centrally acknowledge the fact that we do need to do more as far as compensation for that group. And it's proven to yield some benefits as we've increased that opportunity for monitors. We also work with the city's residency commission. We were able to get residency waivers as well for the FNS staff, as well, the food service staff, as well as the bus monitors. So right now we're able to recruit beyond just folks that live in the city. And that also is another tool that we're hoping that will get us more bus monitors and more food service workers. Food service workers, there are different ranges of hours that are needed depending on the school and type of food that they serve. We're going to continue to advertise for that in the recruitment spaces that we've heard about earlier today. in the new collective bargaining agreement, we're transitioning to an hourly payroll system, which we believe will facilitate improved operational changes and more full work packages for bus monitors as well. So we're trying a bunch of things, ought to say that, and we're going to continue to assess and make adjustments as we need to.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Sam, for that. And thank you, Nate, and the rest of the team. I really do appreciate the progress that we're making. And I also want to just thank Councillor Anderson for allowing me to go a little bit over. I really do appreciate the time and the grace. Thank you.
Absolutely. Council Mejia, thank you so much. Council Braden, I see that you're still here. I know that you did your first round straight, but if you were just here to listen, that's understandable too.
I'm still listening. Thank you.
Councillor Braden, do you have any final questions for the administration?
I would just, one question I had was, and probably my constituents would be interested in just in progress and where we're at with plans for a new elementary school in Alston Brighton to replace the Jackson Man. I know we're in a study process, but just a status update on that conversation would be helpful.
Sure, I know that's part of the, that will be taken into consideration as we go forward with that Jackson Man site in general. So as we get the facilities condition assessment and we get the design studies, study back, more communication will, communication and timelines and updates and progress will be made after that full assessment is complete. So it's still in a little holding pattern in the sense that we know we have to do some upgrades to that building and space, but the question is what exactly do we do in the broader context of the city footprint?
So are you talking about upgrades or are we talking about a complete new rebuild?
Depending on what the FCA brings us back and depending on the design study that we want to do and depending on what programs we put in the space is going to drive a lot of that. So I don't have an answer there for that until we look at the full footprint of the district and understand the needs that we have for that space in that neighborhood.
I think the other thing to remember, Sam, and I've said this before, is just thinking Alston Brighton, the full population of Alston Brighton is much in excess of what the census says we have. We had an undercount of about 6,000. So right now our population is 80,000, and there's a lot of housing coming online, and we've been trying very hard to make that family-friendly housing, so and affordable for families. So I anticipate that the population of Alston Brighton is going to be close to 95,000 in the next 10 years. So I don't think we should be looking at present population. We should be looking at projections forward and hopefully and try and do a better job at retaining our residents, families, and make our schools more attractive to families and not have them move either through economic or just choice. Economic pressures to get out of the neighborhood because it's too expensive or just that they feel that they can go somewhere else and have different opportunities for their children. So we're in a competitive market for students for our seats. So anything we can do to boost that and make it more attractive for families to stay in our city and send their kids to our schools would be really helpful. And that's it. That's my piece for the morning. Just want to thank you all this morning. Your team this morning. Thank you for all your work, and I look forward to the conversation this afternoon.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Thank you for those suggestions.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Of course, Councilor Braden, thank you very much. Councilor Mejia, as always, thank you for sticking around through the entire hearing. We will be meeting this afternoon with BPS again. I will reserve some of my questions. Most of my questions were answered already. My colleagues have similar questions, so I will wait till this afternoon so we can continue our conversation. Thank you very much. Hopefully we will start 2 p.m. sharp. Looking forward to that conversation. This hearing, thank you, Mr. DePina, Mr. Cooter, Ms. Canty, and we'll see each other soon. This hearing is adjourned.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, counselors.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.